Welcome back to Project Pulse. In the previous lesson, we calculated the debt service coverage ratio, or DSCR, which is the lender's core metric to assess whether the project's CFETs are sufficient to cover debt service in each period. In this lesson, we will take the next step and integrate a cash sweep into the model. Right now, we are looking at case 18, which is a 10-year tolling agreement with a 5-year merchant tail considered in the 15-year debt sizing period. Now I'm going to switch from case 18 to case 21, where a cash sweep is active. You will see the cash sweep effect in two places. First, in the cash flow waterfall, because more cash is redirected away from equity and toward debt repayment. And you will also see the effect in the DSCR chart, because the sweep changes the DSCR to 1.0 once the sweep kicks in. Before we model the cash sweep, let's understand why lenders care. For example, an industry standard 5-year mini-perm means the loan may mature after 5 years, but the debt is often sized on a longer sculpted profile, say 15 or 20 years, using the target contracted and merchant DSCRs. The key risk is, what if refinancing doesn't happen at year 5? In that case, lenders typically want the right to a full sweep, meaning after paying scheduled debt service, all remaining cash is swept to repay the loan as fast as possible. That's exactly what we'll model now. If you're new to this Deal Lab series, I recommend starting with part 1, where you can download the model start file for free and build the model alongside me. Link is in the video description below. And now let's move back to the checkpoint file from our previous lesson. Our cash sweep is going to be integrated right underneath our debt service coverage ratio, which we modeled in our last lesson. And the first thing we will do before we implement our cash sweep is also change to case 18 in our live case. Let's run the master macro and let's see what case 18 is reflecting. That is going to be a case assuming a capacity tolling agreement for 10 years with the debt sizing over 15 years, and case 21 will then consider that same debt sizing case just with a cash sweep. Let's scroll up to the revenue section really quick, and you will see that we have a 10-year tolling agreement for those 4 cases, and then a 10-year merchant tail, but our debt will only be sized over 15 years. So let's see in the inputs time dependent sheet what our repayment profile looks like. And you can see for case 18, we have a repayment profile right here now. And what we'll do is take this repayment profile, copy this profile, and let's paste it special as values only, Alt-HVSV, for case 21, which is our cash sweep case. Let's move back to the inputs time independent sheet. And what you will see in case 21 is that our debt sizing in row 254 is not active. So the debt sizing occurs in case 18, and case 21 is just a debt sensitivity, which means our debt sizing is off, but the profile will be based on the debt sizing that takes place in case 18. So that's why we first had to determine our debt profile. And once we copy and pasted the hard-coded values in our inputs time dependent sheet, we are ready to move over to case 21, which will, in addition to case 18, assume a cash sweep starting 5 years after COD. So this could well mean that the financing is based on a 5-year mini-perm, and lenders want to understand what if refinancing doesn't occur after 5 years and there's no bullet repayment, how long would it take to sweep out our debt? Because our debt is sized on a 120 or 130 contracted DSCR and a 2.0 merchant DSCR. We would expect under cash sweep scenario to be repaid much earlier than 15 years. Right now we are repaid in year 15 after COD, And in this lesson, we will see what happens if a cash sweep kicks in from 2031 onwards. And to do this, first thing we will have to do is model our flag, our cash sweep flag. And this is a simple start end date flag. So let's make our life easy, scroll all the way up. And let's pick up the flag from our operations. Hit Control C. Paste it here, Control V, hit F2. And essentially, if our current period is in between those two periods, then the flag will be on, otherwise it will be off. So let's drag this over, Control R. And you can see our cash sweep will kick in from 2031 onwards up until 2040. However, obviously we want the cash sweep only to kick in if it's turned on. So what we will have to do is multiply this with our switch in E591, hit F4 once and drag this over again, Control R. So if we turn the cash sweep off, then we won't have any flags in row 592. And now let's understand what we're going to do in, say, year 2031. So right now, once we scroll up, we can see that we have an outstanding balance of $82.9 million in that year and a principal repayment of $10.8 million. Plus, we also have a term loan interest of roughly $5 million. So in total, that should be approximately $16 million of debt service, which corresponds with this value here. The total targeted debt service is $15.8 million. But once we scroll up further, we will see that we actually have $20.6 million of CFEDs in that period. And whatever is left over after covering our initial term loan principal and interest, we will now use in this lesson to accelerate repayment of our term loan balance. And the first thing we will pull in is our cash brought forward. That is our cash account, which sits in our cash flow statement in our integrated financial statements sheet. So let's move over to that sheet, scroll down at our cash flow statement, and then we pull in our cash brought forward. And we will see that currently we did not model any equity distributions, which means we're just building up all of that cash because we haven't been distributing it to our equity investors. Why not? Because we haven't modeled equity yet. So that's the first thing we'll pull in. Then in addition to our cash, we will also pull in our CFEDs. That is going to be a simple linkage to, let's use the CFEDs up here in 576. And then we will have to subtract three things: our term loan interest, our DSR LC interest, as well as our term loan principal. So this is going to equal to minus, and all of this stuff sits up here already in our DSCR section. So first we'll subtract our term loan interest, hit Control D for our DSR LC interest, and then here for the term loan principal, we will do a simple linkage again. That is minus 581, hit enter. And the sum of all of this is going to be equal to our cash available to cash sweep. Drag all of this over, Control R. And you will see that since we haven't yet modeled our equity part, we actually have quite some cash available to pay down our debt in year 2031. However, once we have integrated our equity section for the first 5 years, there will obviously be a dividend to equity investors, and all of that cash will be distributed to our sponsor, and the lender would not have the comfort knowing that there's going to be 22 million sitting in cash. Now that will allow us to calculate our cash sweep in each period, and it's actually calculated in 2031. That is going to equal to, let's start with the max function, the maximum of either 0, the maximum of 0 because this line will show a positive value and we will flip the sign later once we integrate it into our sections up here. So we essentially don't want to have a cash sweep if we don't have cash available. That's why we have a max 0 function, comma, and then we will take the minimum off. Let's scroll up. We will look at our term loan account, and in a given period, what we will do is we will take the minimum of the sum of our term loan balance brought forward up to principal repayments. So we take the sum of this, which would be roughly 72 million. That is the term loan outstanding after our scheduled principal repayment. So we obviously don't want to sweep more than is still outstanding. Close parentheses. So that's the first figure for the minimum function. And the second one is obviously the cash that is available to sweep. So let's scroll back down. And the cash available to sweep is first our cash sweep flag. So we only want the cash sweep to kick in if it's actually turned on, times our cash available to sweep in row 600. Close parentheses 2 times, hit enter. So right here we have 27 million available and our term loan balance is actually still much higher than 27. So let's copy this, paste it here, drag it all the way over, Control R. And since we haven't yet linked our cash sweep into the overall logic up here, nothing has changed and our term loan would still be repaid after only 15 years. And we will link that into these two respective rows in just a minute. But I want you to see that we again have a macro implemented right here. And usually we do not need a macro to break any circularity unless we want to build a debt sizing case on our cash sweep scenario. And to allow for maximum flexibility for students, I decided to integrate a macro which will allow you to also run debt sizing cases without running into a circularity. So this is going to be, again, a simple copy and paste macro. So if we mark all of these cells right here, this is going to be our cash sweep copy. This one is going to be our cash sweep paste. And then lastly, this row here is going to be our, or actually this one here is going to be our cash sweep delta. And what's missing is the delta calculation in row 605. So this is going to be equal to, as in our previous macro lessons, absolute of our copy row minus our paste row, close parentheses, hit enter, drag this over, Control R. And now we get a macro fail. So what the macro will essentially just do is pick up this calculation here, copy it, and paste it special as values, Alt-H-V-S-V, right here. And now this is actually already slightly tripping up because right now what happens is that we already have a dependent, which is our integrated financial statements. So here the cash sweep is already kicking in, but we haven't yet fully integrated it into our section up here. So let's make sure that we do this before we try to copy and paste again. And first place we will integrate our cash sweep is our term loan account. And that is going to equal to minus our hard-coded line in 604. Drag this one over, Control R. Let's mark all of these cells and actually have no fill. You can see since it's hard codes right now kicking in, we would severely overpay our term loan outstanding. But once we scroll down and now actually hit our master macro to make sure that it runs until our cash sweep delta is 0, then we should not overpay our term loan balance anymore. So let's see what happens. Hit the master macro. And we see that we would sweep out after just 3 years. Let's double check if this makes sense. And indeed, we could actually repay our debt in just 4 more years. And in the first 3 years, we would have to have a cash sweep in addition to the scheduled principal repayment. And then the last year, the actual scheduled principal repayment would be sufficient to repay debt. You will also notice that in the last year, our scheduled principal repayment has been reduced. And the hard code that would have been scheduled is 13.984 million. But what actually happens, and that's the reason why we integrated the minimum max min function here in a previous lesson, is that we actually look how much term loan is outstanding at the beginning of this period, and then we do only pay what's outstanding. And you will see once the cash sweep is active, we repay our debt fully in year 2034 instead of 2040. But that's before considering any dividend distributions to our equity investors in the first 5 years. So what we would usually expect is that this cash balance brought forward would be 0. So let's just drag over a 0 to see the effect. Just for a moment, hit Ctrl R. And let's hit the master macro again. And then you can see the sweep would actually take slightly longer because we don't have this massive cash pile to pay down debt in year 2031. But let's undo this change to make sure that our sweep is fully integrated in the model. So drag over the reference to the integrated financial statements again, Ctrl R, hit the master macro again, and that ensures our cash sweep is properly integrated. Now we also need a simple linkage for our debt service coverage ratio, because right now it's still populating in row 587 as 1.3 with a slight uplift later on. And this is obviously not what we would expect in a full sweep scenario. So right here in row 582, we will link this to minus our, make sure to pick up the paste row 604, our cash sweep. Hit enter, drag this over, Ctrl R. And here we actually don't flip the sign, so let's undo the sign flipping. Drag it over again, Ctrl R. Mark all of these cells. Let's undo the fill color. Go back. And now what you will see is that our DSCR including sweep is 1.0 in year 2032 and 2033. Our lockup flag is also kicking in because our lockup DSCR is 115. And yes, you will see that in 2031, our actual DSCR is at 0.48. That is because we also pull in our cash brought forward, which does not find consideration in our actual DSCR calculation, which only considers our actual CFATs available. And I would rather not pull in our cash brought forward balance into the DSCR calculation, because if cash is locked up right here, it would just artificially inflate our DSCR in the early periods, which wouldn't look as neat. So instead, what we do is do not consider the cash brought forward. And once we have equity distributions modeled, all of this here will be 0 anyway. So let's just do this one more time. Drag it over, Ctrl R, hit the macro, and then you see that our DSCR including sweep, once the cash has been distributed to equity investors in the early periods, there won't be any cash pile available. Then once the cash sweep kicks in, we go from a 1.3 DSCR to a 1.0 DSCR. And in the very last period, we always expect a slightly higher DSCR, because there we might only have a partial term loan balance outstanding and much more cash available to repay that debt. So that's why there's always a slight uplift in the last period. Let's undo the change for our cash brought forward one last time. So let's drag over the reference that we kept right here, Ctrl R, hit the master macro one more time. And now we're done fully integrating our cash sweep. You will also see the changes in the integrated financial statements. So here in the cash flow statement, you can see our cash sweep is kicking in under the senior debt section and accelerates our overall repayment. And period 2031 is pretty interesting because our cash flow available for our DSR LC, which we haven't modeled yet, and our free cash flow to equity is extremely negative at 22 million. And that equals exactly our cash balance. So right here in this period, we actually ground our cash balance to 0, and cash starts building up again in year 2034, which is after our full debt repayment. So in this period here, lenders would have the rights for a full cash sweep if the financing was a mini-perm and refinancing hasn't taken place. All right. This was it for this lesson, guys, and in the next lesson we will cover the loan life coverage ratio, which is another essential lender metric besides the debt service coverage ratio. All right, guys, this was it for this lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson. See you there.